All right, everyone. The state of California is beginning to look more and more like it's trying to, be a sovereign nation or something. They're having a little secessionary sub-movement. They now have an undocumented migrant, an illegal alien, but they use this fluff term in the media now. They say that the term illegal alien is somehow racist. Like being illegally in a country is a race. Like I could go to Mexico and I could be illegally there. I could overstay a tourist visa. It wouldn't make me a member of some race. It would make me a member of a particular legal status, an illegal specifically. Now, but this undocumented migrant in the state of California has for the first time been posted to a bureaucratic position. Now, I thought that would be unlawful because the individual is not legally in the country and has no legal status, so how can they have a bureaucratic position? It's Greek to me. Who knows? The state of California is not operating on the same legal system that the rest of the United States operates on. Now, the funny thing is, if some southern state, let's say that the federal government started some other crackdown. They cracked down on, let's say the federal government were cracking down on guns. And some red states said, no, we're not going to obey. We're going to shield our citizens. We're sanctuary states now for people who want to, in a law-abiding manner own, some gun or some accessory that you've banned. What do you think these same people in California would say? Oh, that's like secessionary rhetoric. You're like trying to revive the Confederacy or something. Well, how is it any different that it happens to be California and that you happen to be Democrats? Well, actually, Democrats were the Klan party, but how is it any different? You're invoking the 10th Amendment, saying it's the state's rights to determine, immigration. But that flies in the face of 200 years of established law. Now part of it I'm slightly sympathetic towards. There should be state discretion involved, in my belief, as a libertarian. If the federal government is overstepping its own constitutional authority, and the states stand in the way of it, drag it through court, they educate their citizens about jury nullification, that's a big one, and do things like that, I don't have a problem with that. Like the drug war. States have begun legalizing marijuana. The federal government has said, it doesn't matter if you legalize it, it's illegal on a federal level. I side with the states on that because there's no constitutional authority given to the federal government anywhere to be able to tell private citizens what they can and cannot put in their bodies. Now I extend that to the whole drug war. It is unconstitutional. Much like it would have been, they understood this back in the good old days. Why do you think that Prohibition began? Prohibition begins with a constitutional amendment because it was understood by politicians at the time, hey, we don't have any legal recourse to prevent people from drinking. We can't do anything about it because people, you'd have to have a constitutional amendment in order to ban alcohol because we can't do it by normal legislation. It would be found unconstitutional. No power is given to the federal authorities to ban such a thing. The only way we can give ourselves that authority is to pass a constitutional amendment. I don't see any constitutional amendment banning marijuana. I don't see a constitutional amendment banning anything under the sun as far as drugs go. Even the case of regulating these substances is questionable at best, insofar as they're not commercial in nature. It's like the concept, you want to regulate, beer that's sold in a store. Yes, absolutely. It's within the government's purview to regulate such a thing. But if I I've got my own still, and I make my own beer, it's like, no, the government has no right to regulate it until I'm selling it. And that's kind of a gray area. It is kind of understood that that's the case. But then if you begin manufacturing on a large scale, they assume that you're selling it. You're obviously not drinking it all yourself. You're doing it in a capitalistic manner, so it comes under regulation. Same with like tobacco. If I'm growing a couple tobacco plants or whatever, and having a little Mesoamerican style ritualism circle with a peace pipe or something, then the federal government doesn't care. If you start selling rollies to people, it'd be a little bit different. But here's the thing. Here's the ultimate thing. The federal government does have the right to police immigration. Absolutely. The states do not. The states have the right, if the federal government forsakes its responsibility, then people, private individuals, not the states in themselves in a government way, but private militias can staff the border. They can enforce law. It's the same as a citizen's arrest. Yes, they have the inalienable right. It's like these militias in like Texas and stuff that sprang up under the Obama era because Obama had catch and release. They were doing a better job than the ICE agents at the time because the ICE agents were essentially told, don't do anything. Sit on your hands and knees, Walk along. If someone's climbing over the fence, don't do anything about it. Give them some water, say hello, and then walk on. Because otherwise, it's a big humanitarian problem. Because hey, I'm Obama and I'm supposed to be the peacemaker, which means, of course, ignoring our evil laws. Well, no, change laws. You have to enforce existing law. Congress has already passed it. It's legal. It was never challenged at the federal level. It was never challenged in the Supreme Court whether the federal government had the right to create regulatory system involved with entering the country. Now, I've said for years, I don't have a problem with immigration. I think that the process for legal immigration needs to be made more cheap and quick and efficient and streamlined as it used to be, specifically so we don't have as much of a problem with illegal immigration by people who otherwise would be perfectly qualified to immigrate legally. We've throttled it with our stupid visa lottery system. There shouldn't be such a system. At the same time, though, we do need a wall on our southern border. And these states, the sanctuary states and cities, are in violation of the law. They are breaking the law. We should fine them. They should be fined by the federal government every day that they continue to operate in that capacity. It's like that one mayor there comes out and tells people, oh, the ICE agents are coming. Everyone's scatter. It's like, so instead of siding with the citizens of your state that you're actually obligated to represent, they are the taxpayers. They pay your salary, the pension that you honestly don't deserve. That goes for all government agents. They pay that. You're not going to represent them and their interests and their demands that, hey, our state needs to be an actual state, as in it has borders. They're there for a reason. They may not actually appear on the ground like a big red line like when you're looking on a map, but we still do have an actual state. We have an actual country. Instead of representing them, they choose to represent people that have no part in that state. They're illegally there. They're not paying taxes. Those that are, if you're under DACA and you get like some job and you're paying taxes, okay, well, then you do. But again, you don't have the same legal status. The fact that you have chosen to reside in the country illegally, that's okay. That's fine. There's deferred action. Nobody's going to kick you out in most cases. You get a traffic ticket and you might get deported at that time. That's a risk you take, though. You already know. You chose to stay in the United States illegally despite knowing that could be a problem. I personally would choose to show mercy towards someone brought here when they're 2 years old. They're brought on their mother's back, okay? They've never spoken a foreign language. They've never lived in a foreign land for any of their adult life. Yeah, okay, to me, they're basically American. They've been raised up here anyway. I wouldn't dispossess them of the only land that they actually would remember. But this individual, I think she was brought here when she was 14. She was already a young adult. She was already high school age. We're not talking about someone who's brought here when they're 14 months old. 14 years old, there's a little bit of a difference now, isn't there? And some people say, well, what if she does a good job? Okay, okay, it doesn't have anything to do with it. It doesn't matter. She's an illegal immigrant. She's not due to have an elected position or a bureaucratic post in any capacity, whether it's advisory or whether it's actually passing or voting on passing rules or regulations of some sort. Only in California would this be considered saying, now I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to tell something to legislatures there and to the vocal minority, which is far left in California. You are going to push the rest of the people of your state too far, and there will be backlash, political backlash that will eventually be quite measurable. The fact that you've chosen to say Trump is a bully, he's evil for wanting to enforce existing laws that weren't even passed by Trump. They were passed in the Bush and Obama eras, sometimes the Clinton era or even before. The fact that he wants to enforce those laws is mean. It's disrespectful to people for some unknown reason, so we're not going to enforce them. People will eventually reject, I think, that argument, including the youth. They're gonna look around themselves and they're gonna see the problems that are going on in your state. They're gonna say, "Oh, there are homeless veterans here. We can't pay for them, but we can pay for these million other people that aren't even legally entitled to be here." That seems a little bit odd to us. It's gonna seem a little bit odd to people. By the way, new propaganda tactic of the globalists is to label globalism an anti-Semitic term, which is very funny. Because it's similar to the claims that have been made by actual supremacists over time. Like, oh, you use the term globalist. Why don't you say what you really mean? Well, I mean globalist. I mean people who run like multinational corporations and banks. Other people might begin rambling in an anti-Semitic manner, but here's the goal. The goal is to take that very small number of people that actually are, they're intoning like it's Jews whenever they talk about globalism, to extrapolate that to everyone that uses the term. It's one of their new strategies since they can't debate us directly. Because quite clearly, you have a bank that's run, there is no country. in which it's specifically part of. It's sort of everywhere. It doesn't have any national loyalty. Not just to the U.S., it doesn't have any national loyalty to anyone else. And if it were operating, by the way, in Israel, it wouldn't have any national loyalty to them and probably defraud their citizens too. Yeah, there's the problem with globalism. It seeks to make us all slaves. So yeah, a little bit odd that the state of California would operate in such a manner, but California's been operating in an odd manner for a while. Look, they loved Ronald Reagan. Figurehead, demented, corporatist, basically a globalist himself in many ways. NATO is not exactly a nationalistic front or anything to do with populism or nativism. Ronald Reagan, they loved him. Another person, very limited amount of political experience, basically just a charismatic actor. Trump's been an actor too. There is a little bit of overlap, except I think Trump, honestly, is not demented like Ronald Reagan was probably by the middle of his first term. Trump, meanwhile, he muddles along as much as he has before. It's quite good. That's about all. Peace out.